Hello. Welcome to yet another episode of Musically Cogitating Podcast, a podcast about the relevance and importance of living in contemporary music of all the kinds, and about how that music impacts all of our lives. I am your host, Ciyadh Wells. Thank you so much for joining me here for yet another episode of what I believe is one of the best podcasts on the internet. Now, I am a little bit biased in saying that, but it's my podcast. It's your podcast, but it's my podcast too. So I'm going to say that. As always, any important and relevant links will be in the show notes. And don't forget to join our Discord server and community. It's where we have little discussions, chat about music and everything. So if after you listen to this episode and you have questions or you just want to chat about the book in general, you can join the book club channel that's located in the Discord, and we'll be there chatting up a storm. If you are enjoying the show, as always, please do not forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. This episode is the last installment in the first book club that is part of this podcast. And this is going to be the final part, the third part of The Revolution Will Not Be Funded Beyond the Nonprofit Industrial Complex. So in this one, Jess and I take on the last section. We go through each of the essays. It's a little bit shorter because there wasn't as much to say. This is the shortest part of the book, actually. So we talked about it. We gave some kind of final thoughts. And I think that we even mentioned the next book. So listen to it. The next book club episode will be sometime over the summer. And so I will be announcing that via social media and the newsletter like always. So without any further ado, here is the final part in this book club episode series for this particular book. This is the third and final part of The Revolution Will Not Be Funded. Beyond the Nonprofit Industrial Complex. And yeah, it's been a time. I think this book has definitely radicalized me in a lot of ways. I'm sure that you would agree. Mm-hmm. And should we start off with just a brief overview of what the book has been so far?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Do you want to go or you want me to go?
I can go. So, again, The Revolution Will Not Be Funded Beyond the Nonprofit Industrial Complex is a series of essays divided into 3 parts, with each of the authors providing their thoughts, ideas, commentary on what is the nonprofit industrial complex. And I think that more people are probably familiar with the idea of the prison industrial complex through the popular work of the New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander, and abolitionists and liberationists like Angela Davis. Mm-hmm. But the same kind of structure does exist in the nonprofit sector. And so that's what this book is about, would you say?
Yeah, I agree. Also, I saw the nonprofit industrial complex on my TikTok timeline For You page the other day. And I was like, oh, okay, we're going mainstream with it. Okay, good. Yeah, I think, there's some question about what exactly it is. And as we come to the end, I think it's coming more into focus for me. And it's just the complex relationships between specifically philanthropy, and that includes foundations and donors, to the people within nonprofits and the community, and generally how that negatively affects the community and de-radicalizes social movements. Does that kind of wrap up what it is?
Yeah. And so, to anyone who's coming to the Musically Cogitating podcast and you're like, thought this podcast was about music. Don't worry. Don't worry. We are always framing all of the books that we read, all of the conversations that we have around arts, music, culture, broadly. I don't know. I've been calling things like nonprofit and for-profit art. I don't know if that's the best way to think about them, but that's what I think. Like nonprofit being, nonprofit arts, and then profit usually being the more commercialized types of things.
Yeah, I think that's good. And like going on your point, I think this book has really put into perspective for me how much we have siloed ourselves in the classical music nonprofit world and how much we aren't thinking of ourselves within the larger context of the nonprofit world, larger social movements, philanthropy, and it's largely detrimental to us, which is I think why we're taking the time to talk about this in this book.
Right. I think we know that there has to be a revolution, right? But it will not be funded. The pun was intended there because in 2 of the last essays, maybe 3, they say, and we realize the revolution would not be funded. And I was like, oh, we waited till the very end of the book to get there, but we got there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, let's be real. What is the revolution? And in this book, it is casting off capitalism and going more towards socialism, Marxism ideas. And that takes everybody to tear down that capitalist system of government and of the economy. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
No, I agree. And I think, before reading this, I was, and even after reading this, I'm still like, what are the alternatives? Like, we want to burn it down, but what are we going to build up when it's done? And I'm grateful for the examples, mostly of communities in Latin America who they haven't burned it down, but they've just started anew.
Yeah.
And they said, we're going to build our own community. We're going to have our own schools. We're going to have our own systems. And it's worked. And I think they've done it on comparatively a pretty large scale. And so it was really great and insightful to hear that change is possible. It can be a little difficult to relate to, maybe, sure, because our context, a lot of the people, listening in ours is the United States and the monster that this country is.
Yeah. No, and I think that is the kind of ongoing theme within specifically part 3, which is titled Rethinking Nonprofits and Reimagining Resistance. And they bring up the Zapatistas quite a bit and the free communities in Brazil. And I know some people here are probably going like, what does the Zapatistas have to do with classical music? But I think there's a really good conversation to be had where a lot of these groups and these movements were like, it's too energy consuming, it's too timely to have to burn down the structure, or oftentimes a revolution has to deal with, oh, my success is taking the place of my oppressor. And then you just reinstitute these structural oppressions. And I think in classical music and in new music, we could really just go, you know what, screw it. I'm just gonna build something outside of the system, as opposed to let me fight against the 501c3 regulations and stuff like that,
Yeah. We're gonna come back to this point of what happens. What do you do when you burn it down? What do you build back up? How do you do that? So let's start though with the first essay, which is Radical Social Change, Searching for a New Foundation. And the point that the author makes that was really interesting was that those without access to funding are most often able to make the most change. And that's not how the nonprofit industrial complex has conditioned us to believe that things work. We are conditioned to believe that those with the most money, individuals or organizations, have the most ability to make change. And I think maybe we're confusing that with they have the most, they potentially have the most power to make change.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think they're right. We're not beholden to anyone. We could do whatever, we as in the people without a ton of money can do whatever we want.
Yeah. And I may be getting my essays mixed up slightly. Oh yeah, they in this essay they bring up the landless workers movement in Brazil, and there's a bit of a story in there about them just kind of doing things that the nonprofit and the NGOs could never dream of doing because they don't have those regulations on them. And you think about having that kind of money, oftentimes you're just burdened with all of those types of restrictions. And what am I trying to say? Sorry.
No, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, you're burdened with those restrictions, and then it forces you to usually not act. Like you're just kind of inactive because of it, or you're paralyzed by indecision.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think maybe this is a great point to create the time to talk about what is it that we want to exist if our current structures don't. So sorry. Now I'm thinking, I've got it. The imagination part, because the author brings up in this essay spirituality and like belief and liberation theologies, and we could get into that, but I really want to talk a little bit about imagination, and if we burn it down, what do we see? Because like you said, and like they said in the article, what often happens is that people will burn the thing down and then they just end up recreating the same thing that they burned down because that's all they know.
Yeah.
And because they've never had the opportunity to imagine or see anything differently. So what is it that in classical music, in the nonprofit arts, that we think could exist if we burn down our current system?
Yeah. And that's like such a good question and such a broad question.
Oh yeah, sorry, it was so broad.
No, you're good. And I think that's the great thing about being part of the humanities, as opposed to something that's like more STEM related. We need both, but we're taught to creatively think. So, in my world, it's like, how do we create a system that is beneficial for all the artists? How do we make the orchestra a much more horizontal type of leadership structure? That's eliminating the board. That's eliminating the superiority that a lot of the conductors have. How do we make artistic planning and programming much more egalitarian? How do we bring the community in? I was just reading The Cycle by one of the biggest like artistic planners, and not coming at him. He's a really good person who plays the game really well, but he imposes a top-down structure with artistic planning. And that is not a future I want to be living in, to be honest. It's a family.
It's the family.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've read that book, you'll get that joke. And I haven't like read that book all the way through, but I get the joke. I think those were some really great things. And I think that's what people think that they're advocating for. Some people are in classical music, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of people though they're not quite sure what they're hoping for. They just feel like, well, what we have now is bad, so
yeah, I'm
just gonna continue to say that it's bad. And that's relevant. That's continuing to point out things that are bad is necessary.
Yeah.
But what do you want to exist instead, and how can we collectively work to create that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe it's not even that we need to burn the thing down so much as that we need to just leave it how it is and go over here.
Yeah.
Which is what the landless movement workers, that's the name of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They said, okay, you're not going to do what we want or how we need it. You're not serving us. So we're just going to build our own school.
Just going to do it over here. Yeah. And something really stuck out to me in this particular essay, and it's the line, sometimes the most radical thing we can do is follow the lead of others. And looking at some of the citations and work cited in some of these, there's like theater groups in Brazil that are cited as like being incredibly, like by our standards, what would be deemed radical, like the theater of the oppressed and things of that sort. And you know, a lot of our leadership in the arts world is of a very similar mind, of a very similar demographic. And I think there is something to the idea of, okay, well, let us look outward. Let's see how people are creating art in some of the most oppressive situations. And maybe we follow the lead of them. And then when we really kind of take off that yoke of what we've been conditioned to think about in the 501(c)(3) status and like that kind of administration, then we can really start creating our own ideas and thinking really deeply about these structures that we want to have in place.
Yes, of course I agree. I think it's just so hard because it takes work. It takes work to know what else exists in the world. It takes a reading of a book such as this one. It takes a listening of a podcast such as this one. It takes a watching a video. It takes talking to someone who you've never talked to. It takes more than what we are used to. And this is not in any way saying that we need to be hustling around and, you know, like working ourselves to death because capitalism. But I think it's saying that there is work to be done. It is difficult work. It is important work. It is meaningful. And that's okay. Like, you need to be engaged in that work.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's just, once again, hitting on that point of we have to break through this siloing that we've done of ourselves and really start connecting ourselves to society, to larger movements. It's not enough to just be like, art is important. Why is it important? What are we doing? What movement are we beholden to? As opposed to just being like, the Schopenhauer ideal of like, we are the finely inspired creator and that's enough. It really isn't anymore.
Yeah. And okay, I'm going to not say what I was thinking. I'm just going to
cut it.
You know, I was just thinking that the way that people think music heals is not it. And you know, you playing a song and calling it healing and calling it hope and you not really, again, being connected to any larger social and political movement is not healing.
Yep.
That is wasting time.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on from that. So this has come up in several of the several of the essays in this one and in some of the other ones that we might discuss. So I would like to again talk about activism as paid work.
Yes.
Because this essay, and in, let's see, I want to say it's the nonprofits and the autonomous grassroots. The authors are kind of saying that activism is not paid work. You will need to sacrifice. You will need to ride in a bus with 50 other people. You will need to sleep on a floor. You do not need to be paid for this.
Mm-hmm.
because that's not the point.
Yep.
And in the first essay, they do say that, activism and progress are stifled because people are beholden to their paychecks. True.
Yeah.
We all know this. And we know people who are fired because of their attempts to organize.
Yeah.
I think finally maybe Amazon is going to get a workers union, but it was only after Bezos decided to no longer
work there.
Yeah,
step down.
That's something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think about this? Activism is not paid work, and I think before we hit record, we were talking about some younger organizers versus some people who are more seasoned in organizing and how they might see those two things differently.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like anytime your paycheck's on the line, especially if you don't have a financial safety net, it's really hard to do the radical work in your workplace. And I would never, especially we live in a society like you still got to pay rent, still got to eat. I think for me, there's two sides of me. There is work side me who is always playing the game of what reform can I put in place now to make the lives of my coworkers, of myself, of the people who we're supposed to be servicing better in the short term. And those, once again, those are very reformist things. Those are like bridging the gap. And then there's me outside of the workplace who is part of more radical, I mean, it's not the most radical, but part of the more like, let's burn it down, let's think long term, because it's really hard to think long term when you're surviving. So that's kind of the way I go about it. And taking it one step further, I really think it's the professional classes, which we talked about in I think episode 2, who are oftentimes occupying the spaces of nonprofits, like of those director positions, of the EDs. It is the professional classes job to be doing the hard activist work of, you're usually able to give more money to these radical causes. You're generally the one who has vacation time and workers protections and stuff like that. And I'm not saying you need to hijack those movements, but you need to go to those leaders and be like, what is the most time consuming thing? And what can I do to help you with those? Because the people who are working paycheck to paycheck, it's hard to get that time. And I really think it's our job to put in a lot of that on the ground, unglamorous. Okay, I'll go canvas for you. I'll go build that infrastructure for you under your direction. So those are really my thoughts about that. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think it's still hard because what none of these essays do present is okay, so I'm not going to be paid for my activism work. What do I do?
Yeah.
Do I just struggle for the sake of the movement?
Struggle.
Which might be what they were implying, but just never decided to say.
Yeah.
And again, it's that in between of like, I need money for things. We in this country are without the ability to live in a society that is anything different than what it is. We can't build and create our own school. We just can't. No matter how many people tried, Amazon, Tesla, they would come along and they would say no.
Yeah.
And that would be it. So, I'm like, well, what do we do instead? Like,
yeah.
So does that mean I do have a job? And I guess they're saying yes, but it doesn't say that that's what they think, because I mean, you're talking about business. You're talking about for profit. That's a whole nother thing that I think we all know is bad, but that we know we're not going to get rid of. So what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that, that's something that I've been seeing grappled with a lot on the ground is there are some people who are like, I play the game professionally. I'm gonna go get my PhD. Like there is not gonna be
Are you talking
any.
about me?
No, I'm not talking about you. But you could, yeah, you're kind of part of
Yeah,
it.
you.
But
I
like,
feel like you are.
yeah, like this whole idea of like I'm gonna play the game and I'm gonna play it well, but there's also this side of me that I'm like subverting the system. Like I am very intelligently subverting the system, and I think absolutely like we need people doing that work. And then there's people I see as well who are like, no, I'm gonna go get a union gig being an electrician. Not that I went to college for that, but like I know that I'm going to be part of the union. I'm going to be protected. I'm going to have my out, like I'm going to have vacation time and benefits and that kind of thing. And then after work, because it's a union gig, I'm not super worn down by the job I'm doing. I'm going to go do this radical build it like network building and like and movement building on the side. And honestly, those are in our society as today, like those are the only two things that I've seen that like don't lead to activist burnout, to be honest.
Mm,
And I'm sure there are people who have solutions, but I'm not seeing a ton. Like it's hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's so difficult,
Yeah.
and I think that difficulty is, oops, greater thought about or expounded upon in the second essay, Are the Cops in Our Heads and Hearts?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my initial reaction to this essay title was like, what are we going to talk about here? but I feel like it doesn't really talk about cops, what I thought was going to be like police in the way that I had assumed. So that was a interesting surprise. That's what we'll call that.
No, I would agree with that. I think too, like this essay, if I'm not mistaken, was written in 2007. Less changed
Yeah.
in the mainstream from 2007 to 2021. So yeah, this one was specifically a lot about the Zapatistas and really that kind of Latin American subverting of the system with like various other movements, which I find just very, I don't know, it gives me a lot of hope, to be honest. Like I read this and I'm like, okay, even under US imperialism, like they're doing the thing, you know?
Right. I think there's always going to be those challenges to this kind of work, but you know, they do talk about again the possibility of it, and they also kind of underscore the importance of having it be big.
Are you talking about the systems, the movements that are subverting the systems? Is that
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like you can't be you if you want to get somewhere and you're organizing, you should probably organize with other people.
Yeah.
And those people should organize with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be hundreds of thousands of people organizing. Like that's how the large change is going to happen. And I think in our society, in America, largely probably because of our individualism, we are conditioned to believe that no, I will make change by myself. I will be the next MLK. As if MLK thought that he was organizing by himself.
Yeah.
Right? Like he knew he wasn't. We know he wasn't. And yet that's still sometimes that's still the narrative. I think every MLK day we get a little bit further and further away from that.
Yeah.
I think social media has like really helped to kind of downplay a lot of that. But you have to do it with other people. You have to do it in community, or it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they really hit hard the idea of activism and political movements in your day-to-day life in this particular essay. And I really think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like sometimes that's what I'm missing from some of the movements, you know, that or some of the organizations where it's like, what's the entry point? You know, I'm losing my mind out here in this capitalist system. I just want to like quit my job every day. Not this job, but you know what I'm saying? Like that like kind of feeling of like, I'm so tired. What is that small resistance every day that we're doing as a collective? You know,
right, that we've like signed up to do, that we know that at this at this time, theoretically, we're gonna do this thing.
Yeah, like you're not alone. And you know, you brought up MLK, and it's like this whole idea of like the bus boycott. That's something that people did every day. They created carpools to, once again, have a separate system where they didn't have to rely on this. But every day, 8 a.m., people just are boycotting buses. And I just feel like that's what a lot of modern movements are missing. I mean, we saw it a little bit with Dogecoin though, right? With like the stock market, right? Everyone's like, okay, buy it, right? Like it's this little thing that somebody can do together. It's a slightly sustained now, but you know, what's that next thing, right?
Right. And it's funny you bring up what are we doing in our everyday lives as a group, but also as individuals too, because I think in the third essay, they kind of bring that up of like, what are you doing? And I think sometimes people, they just don't understand, and it's not their fault, but certain things that are maybe seen as the modern day resistance or an act of solidarity are not.
Yeah, I agree.
For instance, being upset about, we were talking about this too, being upset about what the Instagram copy is.
Yeah.
And saying that you're gonna boycott said organization because of this copy. Okay,
fine.
I validate you being upset about that, and I validate your opinion on that. However, within the larger scope of our movement goals, within our organizing, where does that get us?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I've been on that side of the Twitter mob, right? But it's this, I think, this education cycle that we keep talking about. We just talking ourselves into circles. But like, what's the tangible thing that we can do together? And it's oftentimes not what you would think of first, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think like it's like a change.org petition. While helpful.
Yeah.
While important, what else are we doing? And just thinking back to the Instagram thing or like to social media, I think, and not that this is not true, but there's this also perception of, oh, if I said that I was against the thing, that makes me an activist or like an organizer against that organization or against said thing. And I think digital organizing is valid. Like that's not what I'm saying. I just think that going in like subtweeting people constantly doesn't do much for the collective.
Yeah.
It might make you as the individual feel better, but how is that helping Black, brown, and queer people get paid?
Yeah, exactly. It's, and like taking it to the music world, you know, I always am thinking about these like little acts of resistance in day-to-day life. And I'm going to use the symphony again just because I think it's something that we can all kind of perceive. There are already seeds of resistance within the symphony with a lot of the unions, with the musicians union, with the IATSE union that are, there sometimes there's a third one in house. What's missing, administration wants to divide and conquer these various unions and then the ununionized administration. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, thing that you could do is find the underpaid admin worker and strike up an actual friendship, because there is a lot of hostility between musicians and the administration. And I can assure you that, like, those low paying jobs, that administration is feeling the same frustration as you are if you're a musician in the symphony or if you are a worker in the IATSE crew or vice versa. And having been through one musician strike, I can assure you that, like, we didn't disagree with the musicians. And this is controversial for me to say because it's like, let's preserve the organization. However, it seemed unattainable to us. Like, now that I've been in the game, I could have absolutely talked to my coworkers and been like, yeah, let's go outside and let's strike with the musicians because I want better pay too. If you get, we all come up together, right? We all come up together. But there wasn't that dialogue happening. So once again, sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is just talk to the coworkers you usually wouldn't. Start that conversation. Build those friendships, because if they're friends, they're probably going to have your back, right? Right. If it's a true friendship. So I don't know, a little controversial, but just an idea.
No, I like that. I think that was a good word. Make friends with people you work with. Yeah. Don't be against them. Be with them.
Yeah.
Because you're probably in the same fight. But white supremacy has made it seem as though you are not.
Yeah.
When you definitely are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So. All right. The third essay here is nonprofits and the autonomous grassroots. And as I was going through this essay, I thought that it might be helpful for us to quickly talk about what is grassroots broadly first, and then in our context of classical music, because people say all the time, oh, they need to bring in a grassroots organizer. They need to bring in somebody who's grassroots, blah, 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 blah. And what does that mean? I don't know. So if we could get to the answer of what does that mean in the next couple of sentences, that would be great for me.
Yeah. Are you directing that question to me?
Well, if you could just talk about what grassroots means to you, that'd be great. That'd be a good start.
From what I've seen on the ground, it's the person in the group that is good at making friends. Going back to that, it's the person in the group who is connected to the community, who is not scared to talk to people in the community about, this is X organization, we're doing X thing, this is how it's going to benefit you. Are you willing to volunteer your time? It's that kind of thought leader, rhetoric leader, just really good kind of personable person usually, who also has a mind for, I think, long-term strategy, is the grassroots organizer. Grassroots effort, I think, generally is the organizations that are working outside of corporate America and the 501c3s, in my opinion, pooling resources together, doing mutual aid together, not spending a whole lot of time thinking about where their money is coming from, but thinking about what action is next. So that's kind of my working definition of just grassroots organizer and grassroots organizing.
I would say that my definition of grassroots is the people doing the work.
Yeah.
And I mean, like really doing the work. And like you said, who are making friends, who are talking to people, who are more concerned about the actions and the results of their work than telling people about the actions and the results of their work and about what they should be doing.
There it is. Yeah.
Because it's like, well, if you're so worried about what I'm doing, why don't you go do
Yeah.
something too? You know, like
Yeah.
we can be friends. Like we don't have to agree about everything, but we can still be friends, and we can be grassroots, and we can organize around for or about this certain topic. And oh yes, fundraising, grassroots fundraising. There was an essay in the second part that talks about this too. But in this essay, there's of course discussion around grassroots fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that once your organization gets that first grant dollar, I don't know if I don't know how much grass your roots have in them anymore, you know?
I would agree.
Or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe I said that backwards, but I don't know. I think that you've gone up a rung on the ladder. You've professionalized your organization.
Yep.
And then you become part of the cycle, the application cycle of oh, we need to be applying for this next thing to get the money to do this work, to apply. And I think that simply also, I think that also there is this idea that if you do in fact work for a larger nonprofit and you do receive donations from individuals and foundations, that because you receive donations from individuals, that is grassroots fundraising. And I would disagree with that.
I agree. I totally agree. In my head, grassroots, a very essential part of it is you are subverting the system. You're actively working against the system or to like quote unquote burn it down. You're not making friends with the system. You're not, I think, and that's something that was talked about in maybe this essay or the essay before, is nonprofits really force us to have a relationship with basically our oppressors. Grassroots, you don't have to do that. And it's generally actively discouraged that you make that concession unless it's for a very, very specific thing. But then that relationship runs out. You are not, like, your movement, your grassroots organization is not going to fall when you stop that relationship with the system.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the last essay, which is on our own terms, it talks about how sister to sister, which I don't think they're really organizing together anymore. I tried to look, but I don't think they are.
Seems like they disbanded, yeah.
How they went from an organization that was grassroots to a professionalized 501c3. And then they were like, oh no, this is not what we wanted.
Yeah.
We're going to go back to being grassroots. We're going to go back to being all volunteer run. And that's what they did.
Yeah.
So you can go back if you want to.
Yeah.
But this article, Nonprofits and the Autonomous Grassroots, is really talking about, again, as a grassroots movement or organizing body, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You're autonomous.
Yeah.
You're not beholden to anyone's dollars. You're not worrying about how much money I'm making off of this. You're really just worried about, are we doing the right thing? Are we influencing our community? Are we making our community better?
Yeah. The one thing I do have to give this essay for people listening who don't want to burn down the system and or maybe in an arts nonprofit who are like, oh, okay, this is great, but I'm still going to be working in a nonprofit. Like, what can I do? Is they did bring up the idea of nonprofits kind of smoothing the way for a revolution, beginning to push kind of legislative policies, Gaining elections in swing states was also talked about. Like I really was thinking about Georgia swinging. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a lot of grassroots organizing and nonprofits partnering with those grassroots organizations. I mean, it was really effective, obviously.
Yeah, right.
Winning over the commercial media is actually a big one because it's hard to have a revolution if like the cultural consciousness is not in it. And if
Mhm.
you, and I think that's part of what I was trying to get at with like the whole idea of like playing the game really well, like getting that PhD, becoming professionally recognized, that kind of thing. It's much easier to win over mainstream media and pave the way for more radical ideas if you're kind of already playing the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just
No, you're good. You're good.
that's how I feel about my life.
Yeah, I know. And like I mean, that's what I'm doing. No, I think that's like something that classical music, really talking about this, like really going deep. Classical music has the chance to do that. We are in and around donors, oftentimes the rich white elite, in a way that a lot of other organizations are not. We can have certain conversations, we can smooth over certain cultural thoughts that they may not be digesting elsewhere. And we just have to find a way to do that. I don't know how you feel about that, but just some half-baked ideas.
Yeah, I think we can. I think we can
Yeah.
too. We think that we can't, but we can.
Yeah.
We can make that change. It is possible. It is possible to turn a rich white person into a funder of your potentially grassroots work. Not like from a foundation fund, by the way.
No.
They're just giving you money and then they're walking away. That's mainly what I'm getting at.
I agree.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because we work at a nonprofit. We probably will continue to work at nonprofits if we're being honest with ourselves.
100%, yeah.
A lot of the people listening work at nonprofits or educational institutions and might be just wondering, what does this mean for me? And I think this means for you to examine where you are, examine yourself, your place in your local music community, but in your local community broadly, because that involvement is going to be crucial to any kind of change in classical music.
Yep.
We as classical musicians don't have it together enough to just be on our own. So we're gonna need to get to make, so like you said, we're gonna need to make some friends with some people and ask them for some help because we need it, because the way that we're going about it is it's not working.
Yeah
right now.
I think too, you and I are part of a board of a nonprofit in our area, and I would say, I mean, it has its issues as well, but it's definitely a little bit more radical. I don't know if I would say radical. It's more progressive.
It's progressive.
It's progressive with how it thinks about nonprofit leadership, and it is trying to be much more egalitarian, not as top down. I think it's okay, and it is a arts and cultural organization within our city. It's okay to seek out outside things where you can have an impact with like-minded progressive people in your city that may help with the next generation of donors, with the next generation of arts administrators, that kind of thing, because we're playing the long game, right?
Right.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to be, the next generation is on TikTok. They are coming.
Yeah.
They will burn it down.
Oh, 100%.
If we don't get it together before they do. And I think the thing about that being on that board though is like, there are a couple of people who don't work for nonprofits there. Yeah. So it's really interesting. I just thought about that. Because we've been talking about that, because that's what we talk about. Oh, we're talking shop today. We're talking about nonprofits.
Talking shop. No, I think too, like where I get the best ideas are not from people in my field. It's a lot of people who are presenting different ideas to me, who are once again, in the union jobs, who are union organizers, who are working in the corporate sphere or in academia, but not in music. And I'm like, oh, wait, wow, we really have siloed ourselves. Like, we can absolutely employ that in the music world, and it will make our quality of life in the short term and midterm so much better. And we just don't.
Yeah. I'm there with you. The last essay is on our terms 10 years of radical community building with Sister to Sister. And this was really an overview of, again, what I was saying, that how an organization went from being grassroots to being professionalized through the typical means of foundation to grants and larger donors, to saying, oh, joke's on us. That's not really what we want. We're going to go back to our grassroots model and organizing. So just any thoughts that you have on that?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of what we've already stated. I guess what I'm really interested in is, they were like, we decided not to have any full-time staff. We decided not to have a board of directors. What I'm interested in is that conversation during the transition that I don't think they really talked about. Is like, if you are part of a nonprofit and you decide to go the very progressive route of like, I want to disband, I no longer want to have 501c3 status, but I still want to be an organization. What is that conversation that you have with your staff and board members to get you from point A to point B?
I think it's painful.
I imagine, yeah. Like, do you give them a timeline where you're like, we're going to disband in 2 years? You have 2 years to figure out what your next step is. This is why we're doing it, that kind of thing. Like, what is that process like,
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that it's something like that. But I can't imagine being at an organization and then the staff saying, oh no, this isn't how we're going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And also, having a board that quote unquote allows you to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of boards run organizations, right? Like, if for anyone who's listening who might be unfamiliar with the way that nonprofits run, there are a lot of nonprofits who don't have full-time staff, but they just have volunteer board members who more or less contribute financially to the organization. So if you ever go to a board meeting, they'll be like, oh, blah, 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 our fiduciary responsibility. So they're responsible fiscally for the growth and health of the organization. So the board that you and I are on, and a couple of others that I've since joined, they're all at different levels. Some of them have full-time staff of several people. Some of them have like 3 people on staff. And then you have your nonprofit that has no staff people, only has the board, and more or less the board is the staff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the different kinds of nonprofits, broadly speaking, about how like the board can play a role into how the nonprofit exists.
Yeah, I think it's like interesting as well, where I believe in part 2, it talks about having nonprofits be almost resources for grassroots movements. I feel like if the staff or like part of the board came, like if I was on the board and they were like, we want to disband, before we disbanded, like I would be really interested in being like, well, is there a social movement that we could serve with, like with our funding, with something, like, is there something that we could give them before we're like, bye? Also, I'm thinking with like the board that we're on, that organization could easily not be a 501c3.
Sometimes I kind of wonder why we are.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, I think the president of the board, who may or may not be listening to this, I feel like they might have some of the same questions.
Yeah, and I think those are good questions to ask if you do like end up on a board that's like that. Because like we are seeking some grant funding, but that's like some of the first grant funding that we're seeking, and we're like doing fairly well without it. So it's really that kind of conversation that you need to have if you find yourself in a position of power. Like why did we opt into the industrial complex to begin with?
Right.
What's the point? Um, Anyway, just new ideas as I'm sitting here on this podcast going like,
Yeah.
why
No,
do we
I
do
love it.
this?
I love it. Like it's this going back to this notion of to be an organized group, you don't have to have a lot of money.
Yeah.
To put on good programming, you don't have to have a lot of money. You don't need to have a lot of money.
No.
Some places choose to do it that way. And if you want to do it that way, maybe this organization isn't the right one for that.
Yeah.
It's not the right, fit for that. It doesn't mean it's not the right fit for you. It just means that your idea of the next big whatever is not going to be this organization. Yeah. I do want to say though that I think everyone should join a board at some point or a committee for an organization.
Yeah.
Grassroots or institutionalized, professionalized 501c3. It's a good way to be involved.
I would say both. Do both.
Do both. Oh, Jess says do both. Okay.
Do both.
Yeah, I would actually like to join a committee that's not part of a board. So I'm working on that. but yeah, I think it's a really, really good way to be involved. It's a good way to meet people.
Yeah.
And it's a good way to meet people who are not musicians. And if you are a musician and you still want to be connected to the arts, because that's fine. Like I'm mostly serve organizations that are in the arts. They're not all my art form.
I agree. That's like invaluable.
Right.
Yeah. See, I'm very much on the side of like, I am very picky with what in the arts I do. I very much seek non-arts organizations just because I go insane if I only am in the arts. But yeah, I think both experiences are invaluable. I think it's also very humbling, to be honest, because you realize how difficult, especially right now, community organizing is on all levels. It's difficult work. It's time-consuming work. It often does not yield the results you want, and that's okay. But yeah, highly suggest.
Yeah, do it. You're not too young.
No.
So if you're listening to this and you're 19 or something, like go join a board. And you know why? Because they will ask you how to use TikTok, and then you can show them how to use TikTok. They will ask you about social media, and you will be like, give me your phone. Where's Canva? Let me fix it up. And you will know, and you will be invaluable to that organization if you know how to do those types of things. And that's giving back. That's being of service to your community.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a little different because you're going to be on a committee with people who are twice your age, who are older than your parents.
Yeah.
But I think it's good for everyone to also like understand that people of all ages have thoughts and ideas and opinions, and that we can all respect each other and work together for that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm 25 and on boards I shouldn't be on, right? Like,
yeah.
don't fit the standard board idea. But yeah, no, you're 100% right on that. And I think too, like something that's really invaluable for younger people who decide to do that, it's helped me learn how to talk to people outside of my age demographic. Yeah, and be like, okay, you and I agree on some things, but how we're getting, like, what you're thinking about how to get from point A to point B is very different than how I would get from point A to point B. Let's see if I can talk diplomatically. Let's see if I can talk in a way that like maybe we can reach an agreement or something like that. That's really good experience in my opinion, especially in the classical music world.
I agree. Like, we need to be better about knowing how to talk to people. Like, my gosh, like, ooh, some people can't carry on a conversation
That
for
isn't about
nothing.
Shostakovich. I'm coming for the musicians. I've been there. I've been at those
Well,
dinners.
I've been at those
I've
dinners.
been at those dinners. Okay. Total aside, but tell me, those who aren't listening, who are classical musicians, we've all been out to some dinner with donors, and your colleagues literally cannot talk about anything other than their instrument, and it's like kind of embarrassing. You're like,
Yeah.
can we talk about anything? Like, I don't need you to talk about sports, but like anything else, like, please.
Oh, I was thinking sports. I was like, let's talk about sports. But also, to the people out there who are the classical musicians who are out there who are like, sports are bad.
Absolutely, like this whole oh, we're like high art. Okay, that's white supremacy, and we can dissect that and some other day, but like, yeah, don't think you're better than anything else because
No.
you're classical
And
musicians.
if you're upset that they make more money than you do, be mad at the system,
Not at them.
not at them.
I've seen paychecks from concert masters. Don't tell me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I've been in what has been deemed impoverished cities and seen what concert masters make. Do not come at sports teams. Yes, absolutely. Go at the system.
Yeah, there are definitely some people in orchestras who make more than, say, your seventh man on an NBA team or a sixth man, like
But
they
we
make
don't
more.
know enough about sports, a lot of us, to know that. We just think they're all making millions.
And some of them are,
Yeah.
but a lot of them aren't. And women's sports, oh, don't get me started. They're making way less than anybody in an orchestra is making.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
let's
pretty
be real
visible.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, but again, be mad at the system. You refuse to see that the system is the problem, not that this person is trying to support a family of 15. So, just a little side there.
Though, that's a good takeaway. Be mad at the system.
Yeah.
Be mad at the system. If you're in the nonprofit world and you're getting angry at your colleagues, really take a step back. And sometimes it's justified. But I see a lot of nonprofits get angry at their community in a weird way. Don't get mad at your community for not supporting you. Get mad at the system. Think about what's happening. Why is that, as opposed to misplaced aggression?
The look on your face.
Sorry.
It was great.
I am passionate about this.
So that was part 3 of The Revolution Will Not Be Funded Beyond the Nonprofit Industrial Complex. That is the end. And I'm really glad that we ended up reading this book first.
Same.
And we split it up over 3 episodes because we wanted to be able to go in depth about each of the essays, because there are a lot of essays in here.
Yeah.
And we would have just glossed over and missed a lot of what I think was really important material and really important lessons learned from this text. So that's kind of like the first book that we read on the Musically Cogitating podcast book club. And we're going to do a book club each quarter. So the next book club will be in Q2, as the tech bros like to say. And that'll be sometime between April, May, and June.
Do we know what we're reading yet?
I think we're going to read Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah. And do you like a / Theater of the Oppressed?
Get yourself a copy.
Yes. So it'll be in the bookshop link there. You can go and purchase that at no cost to you. The show gets a little bit of that back. Affiliate link. And yeah, I'll announce when we're gonna start, or we'll probably just do one episode for that, but I'll announce that ahead of time for everyone who's listening, so that you can read along or read before, or just know what you're getting yourself into with that, because I know that there's a lot to unpack there with Pedagogy of the Press and Theater of the Oppressed. So I'm looking forward to that. These book clubs, they really help me to keep up with the books I said I was going to read and like have been wanting to read.
Same.
So it's good to have that, like, oh, we're recording at this time. Okay, I need to have read the book. I need to have finished my notes. I need to have thought about it by this time. So it's really great for that.
I agree. I order too many books, Ciyadh. It's a problem.
No, it's never a problem. You're just building an anti-library.
An anti-library.
Have you not heard about an anti-library?
No, I have.
Oh, okay,
I love it. Yeah. We'll talk offline.
So cool. Well, thank you to Jess for always co-hosting these shows with me, and we'll be back. Yeah, in Q2 with the next part of the series. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Ciyadh.
Wow. What a journey that we just went on there. 1 book, 3 parts, 3 episodes. It was a lot of fun. I'm so glad that I had this idea, and I'm so glad that Jess goes along with all of the ideas that I have for things, and that Jess is willing to just hang in there and go for it. So it was a lot of fun. Even if, you didn't read the book or you don't really care to read the whole book, I would say to just take a look at a few of the essays, maybe skim through, and that would be a really, really good start and introduction to kind of some of the ideas and concepts that are discussed in the book. You can follow the podcast on social media. Lots of Instagramming these days. That's where it is. That's where we're hanging out. So be sure to be on Instagram. And of course, you can check the website for all of those updates and things. The next Musically Cogitating newsletter will be out at the end of this month, so you can subscribe in the link in the show notes. And if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please give it a like, rating, and review, as it helps me to make the show better. Thank you to everyone who has supported the show by buying us a coffee or a book using the Buy Me a Coffee link or support the show link. It means the world, and it helps keep the lights on and the podcast moving along. So thank you to those of you who have supported there. That is all for today. As always, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Musically Cogitating podcast. Until then, enjoy your day, and yeah, have fun.